Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809, in a small log cabin in Hodgenville, Kentucky, a place surrounded by forests and hardship, and from the very beginning his life was marked by struggle, poverty, and uncertainty, as his family owned almost nothing and survived by farming the land with their own hands. His father, Thomas Lincoln, was a hardworking but uneducated man, and his mother, Nancy Lincoln, was kind, gentle, and deeply influential in shaping young Abraham's character. But tragedy struck early when Abraham was only 9 years old and his mother passed away from milk sickness, a common disease at the time, leaving him heartbroken and emotionally scarred. Yet even in sorrow he showed strength beyond his years, helping his father and siblings while silently carrying the pain of loss. And although formal education was rare and limited, Abraham developed a deep love for reading, often borrowing books from neighbors and walking miles just to return them, reading by candlelight or firelight after exhausting days of physical labor, and through books he discovered a world beyond poverty, learning about law, history, and human values, which slowly shaped his beliefs about justice, freedom, and equality. As a young man, Lincoln worked many jobs including farming, rail splitting, storekeeping, and even serving as a postmaster, but none of these roles satisfied his hunger for purpose, and despite many failures he never gave up, teaching himself law without attending a university, studying borrowed books late into the night until he finally became a lawyer, known for his honesty and integrity, earning the nickname Honest Abe. Yet his personal life was not free from pain as he struggled with deep depression and self-doubt, especially after experiencing romantic heartbreaks and repeated political defeats. But instead of surrendering to despair, he used his suffering to understand others better, developing empathy that later defined his leadership. Lincoln entered politics during a time when America was deeply divided over the issue of slavery, a cruel system that denied freedom and humanity to millions. And although Lincoln personally believed slavery was morally wrong, he faced the challenge of leading a nation where opinions were violently opposed. His early political career was filled with losses, including failed campaigns for the Senate. But these defeats strengthened his resolve rather than breaking it. And in 1860, against all odds, he was elected the 16th President of the United States, a moment that shocked the nation and immediately triggered crisis, as several Southern states seceded from the Union, leading to the outbreak of the American Civil War, one of the bloodiest conflicts in history, and Lincoln now carried the unimaginable burden of holding the nation together, making decisions that would cost countless lives. Yet throughout the war he remained committed to preserving the Union and ending slavery, despite criticism, mockery, and constant threats, and in 1863 he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, a bold declaration that freed enslaved people in rebellious states, transforming the war from a fight for unity into a moral struggle for human freedom. Though the proclamation did not end slavery immediately, it changed the course of history and paved the way for the eventual abolition of slavery through the 13th Amendment. During this time, Lincoln endured immense personal sorrow, including the death of his beloved son Willie, which deeply wounded him. Yet he continued to lead with humility and compassion, often visiting wounded soldiers and writing letters to grieving families, showing a humanity rarely seen in leaders of his time. And as the war dragged on, many doubted him. Newspapers attacked him, political rivals plotted against him, and the weight of leadership aged him rapidly. But Lincoln never lost his belief in democracy and the idea that all people deserve dignity. And when the war finally ended in 1865, the nation was exhausted but hopeful, and Lincoln delivered his second inaugural address, a speech filled not with revenge but forgiveness, urging Americans to rebuild with malice toward none, with charity for all. Yet tragically, just days later, on April 14, 1865, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth while attending a play at Ford's Theater, shocking the world and plunging the nation into mourning. And though his life ended suddenly, his legacy lived on far beyond his years, transforming America forever, as Lincoln became a symbol of perseverance, moral courage, and leadership rooted in humility rather than power. And today his life continues to inspire millions around the world, especially those who struggle with failure, poverty, or self-doubt, proving that greatness does not come from privilege but from persistence, integrity, and an unshakable belief in justice. And through the story of Abraham Lincoln, we learn not only history, but also powerful lessons about resilience, compassion, and the importance of standing up for what is right even when the cost is high, making his life one of the most inspiring journeys ever told and a perfect example of how learning English through real history can motivate, educate, and empower people across generations and cultures. Muji script 3,000 words, key or BNA do got it. Below is an approximately 3,000-word inspirational English script based on Abraham Lincoln's life. Written smoothly for voiceover, storytelling style, and perfect for CapCut YouTube documentary videos. I've kept it engaging, emotional, and easy English, and one continuous flow so you can paste it directly without issues. Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809, in a small wooden log cabin in Hodgenville, Kentucky, a remote place surrounded by thick forests, cold winters, and constant struggle, and from the very first day of his life, hardship followed him closely because his family owned almost nothing except their honesty, strength, and willingness to work with their hands. His father, Thomas Lincoln, was a hard-working farmer who could not read or write, yet believed deeply in discipline and effort, while his mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, was gentle, loving, and wise beyond her education, and she became the first light of moral guidance in young Abraham's life, teaching him kindness, humility, and the importance of doing what is right even when life is unfair. But tragedy arrived early and without warning, because when Abraham was only 9 years old, his beloved mother died from milk sickness, a deadly disease caused by contaminated milk, leaving the family broken and young Abraham emotionally wounded in a way that never truly healed. Yet, even in that pain, he did not complain, he did not rebel. Instead, he grew quieter, more thoughtful, and more responsible, helping his father care for his siblings, carrying grief silently while learning that life does not promise comfort, only purpose. Education was a luxury Abraham Lincoln did not have. Schools were rare, teachers were few, and books were even rarer. Yet inside him burned an unstoppable hunger to learn, and whenever he found a book, he treated it like treasure, borrowing books from neighbors, walking miles just to return them safely, reading late into the night by the weak glow of candlelight or firelight after long days of backbreaking physical labor, and those books opened his mind to a world far bigger than poverty, teaching him about history, law, logic, and the idea that every human being deserved dignity, slowly shaping his beliefs about justice, freedom, and equality, values that would later define a nation. As a young man, Lincoln worked many jobs. He split rails, farmed fields, served as a storekeeper, worked on riverboats, and even became a postmaster, yet none of these roles satisfied the deep sense of purpose growing inside him. He failed, often businesses collapsed, money disappeared, and critics laughed at him, but failure never stopped him, because Lincoln believed that quitting was the only true defeat. So he taught himself law without attending college, reading legal books borrowed from others, studying late into the night until exhaustion became routine, and eventually, through sheer determination, he became a lawyer, respected not because of wealth or status, but because of his honesty, fairness, and ability to see truth from every side, earning him the name Honest Abe. Yet behind his calm exterior, Lincoln carried deep emotional pain. He struggled with depression, loneliness, and self-doubt, losing loved ones, suffering heartbreak, and questioning his own worth. But instead of letting darkness consume him, he allowed suffering to deepen his understanding of others, transforming pain into empathy, and this empathy became the foundation of his leadership. Because Lincoln did not rule from arrogance or pride, he led from compassion and understanding. When Lincoln entered politics, America was deeply divided over slavery, a cruel system that denied millions their freedom and humanity. And while Lincoln believed slavery was morally wrong, he also understood the fragile balance holding the nation together. His early political career was filled with defeat. He lost elections, faced humiliation, and endured public criticism, but every failure sharpened his resolve, teaching him patience, resilience, and the importance of long-term vision. And finally, in 1860, against all expectations, Abraham Lincoln was elected the 16th President of the United States. His victory shocked the nation and immediately triggered crisis. Southern states began seceding from the Union, and America plunged into the Civil War, one of the bloodiest conflicts in history, and suddenly Lincoln carried the unbearable weight of a nation tearing itself apart, knowing every decision could cost thousands of lives. Yet he never abandoned his core belief that the Union must be preserved and that freedom must eventually prevail. During the war, Lincoln faced relentless criticism. Newspapers mocked him, political rivals attacked him, generals doubted him, and assassination threats followed him daily, but he stood firm, believing leadership was not about popularity, but about responsibility, and in 1863, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, a historic declaration that freed enslaved people in rebellious states, transforming the war from a political conflict into a moral struggle for human freedom. Even though it did not end slavery instantly, it changed the direction of history forever and laid the foundation for the 13th Amendment. While leading a nation through war, Lincoln suffered unimaginable personal loss, including the death of his young son Willie, a tragedy that shattered him emotionally. Yet even in grief, he continued to serve, visiting wounded soldiers, comforting families, and writing letters filled with compassion, showing humanity rarely seen in power. And as the war dragged on, the stress aged him rapidly. Lines etched deeply into his face, yet his belief in democracy and human dignity never faded. In 1865, as the war finally ended, the nation stood exhausted but hopeful. And Lincoln delivered his second inaugural address not with hatred or revenge, but with forgiveness, urging Americans to heal with malice toward none, with charity for all. But tragedy struck once more when, just days later, on April 14, 1865, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth while attending a play at Ford's Theater, plunging the nation into mourning. Though his life ended suddenly, his legacy endured forever, transforming America and inspiring generations, proving that greatness is not born from privilege, but from persistence, integrity, and courage. And today, Abraham Lincoln stands as a timeless symbol of resilience, moral leadership, and the power of standing up for justice even when the cost is high, reminding the world that one determined individual, guided by values and compassion, can change the course of history.